Yeah, considering how quickly I finished today's book, which is Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson, you'd think that I would have gotten around to reviewing it sooner, but things have happened. And I forgot stuff, so I've spent the last hour going back through it, and I'm just saying that was unacceptable. I shouldn't have forgotten this book, but I did. I read this book in college. I also read another book that's from like the alternate perspective. It's not the same author, it's not the same story, but it's the same subject matter just from the guy's perspective. And I thought it was really interesting. I need to read that book again, but from what I remember, I wasn't convinced about his perspective. But anyways, I've always enjoyed this book. I refuse to watch the movie, one, because books are always better, and two, because the movie stars Kristen Stewart and I just am not impressed by her acting abilities. But I've always held this book in high regard and I wanted to read it again. Thankfully, it will stay in my January lineup. If you don't know, Speak is a book about sexual assault. We meet the main character, her name is Melinda, at the very beginning. She's starting high school, but something has happened. Something happened over the summer that has left her adrift, has left her an outcast, has left her a pariah. She's no longer part of her old friend group, the Plain Janes, partially because of what happened, but partially because all the girls went their separate ways. There's one girl who's inconsequential, so I won't even mention her. She moved away and she doesn't matter. But the others are Rachel, or Rochelle, her best friend, or her old best friend, and Rachel has become Rochelle because her new group is the international students, and so she's trying to get in touch with her European roots or something. There are Nicole and Ivy. Nicole is like super athlete and Ivy is super theater, super artist. That's what's happening as we open up at the beginning of the school year and she's dreading being in school. The school is also having something of an identity crisis because apparently being known as the Trojans is not an idea that they want to be associated with anymore. So this entire novel, they continue to switch mascots. I thought it was silly. I mean, there was a point to it, but we hear about how, budgets are being cut and this and that and the other, yet they change school mascots like 5 times. I'm assuming that they're keeping their school colors the whole time, but all the money that's got to go into signage and stuff, I don't know. The realistic part of me was like, this is stupid. Why are you doing this? Yet you're complaining about the art teacher and how there's no budget for his art supplies. Excuse me, I have been sneezing like crazy. And I've had so much to do. Really need to get this one done soon so I can get other stuff done. I have another book that I need to review, but it's not happening tonight. We meet quite a few of her teachers. There's Mr. Neck, principal, hair woman, and then the most important one is Mr. Freeman, who is her art teacher. I don't know if the teacher's name is actually Mr. Neck or if that's just how she refers to him. I think it is her nickname for him because she can't be bothered to actually know their names. Like, she doesn't respect them enough. But there's one thing where she had called him Mr. Neck and it made it sound like that could actually be his name. Neither here nor there. It's just an observation that I had. But Mr. Freeman is her art teacher. And throughout this novel, she will give report card updates, and the only class that she continues to do well in is art. Assignment she is given at the beginning of the year is, I'm going to go around with a bowl of paper slips, and on these slips they're basically nouns, and what you need to do is you pick a slip and then you have to make art out of this word. She chooses the word tree. And she works the entire school year to make this tree come to life. Except for the symbolism, I don't understand why she put so much effort into this. I feel like she doesn't even know why, because she does start skipping school at a certain point. So it's not because it's important for her grades, but there is something about this assignment that is important to her. And so the entire novel, she is working in different mediums to bring this tree to life. Also, what we see throughout this novel is she slowly stops speaking. Her relationship with her parents begins to fall apart, and her grades continue to fall. Before and amongst all of that, she does make one new friend, and her name is Heather. She's Heather from Ohio. Heather's the new girl. I can't remember exactly why they connected, but Heather is so appreciative of Melinda because Melinda accepts her, but she is dying to have friends, dying to be included, not just like popular, but she just wants to be part of everything. She wants to feel like she belongs. And she eventually starts noticing Melinda has no interest whatsoever in doing the same thing. And they do have something of an argument in which she is having just a little bit of an emotional breakdown, and she calls Melinda out on it, and then she's quick to apologize, but Melinda, she don't really seem to care so much, but we do start seeing that they're not a good fit, and something's gotta give. Melinda trying to get away from Mr. Neck because somehow all the teachers hate her, particularly Mr. Neck. He wants to ask her about something, confront her about something. And so in trying to escape him, she ends up in the senior corridor, which I guess is also taboo, and stumbles upon an empty janitor's closet. And this is a closet that she uses as an escape throughout the year. It's a place where she can get away. And throughout the course of the novel, she starts to make it her own. At the end, when she has found her healing and peace, we see her cleaning out this closet and realizing, hey, there are things about it that I put in there that I want to keep, but on the whole, I'm going to leave this closet for somebody else who might need it next year. One thing that I really enjoyed about this novel was the formatting, because the chapters were super duper short, and while we kind of connected with her on a certain emotional level, she was also so disconnected, and I thought that was a really great portrayal of somebody who had gone through a traumatic event. We still don't know what the traumatic event is, but we do know that there's this guy, she calls him It at first, so we're like, he's got something to do with whatever happened to her. Eventually we learn that his name is Andy Evans, and he's this really attractive senior. He kind of has a reputation with the ladies, but she does not care for him. She does not think much of him. At the homecoming pep rally, she wasn't planning on going. She was gonna go hang out in her closet, but Heather caught her and was like, hey, let's go. Like, we need to be school spirited. They sit with some girls, or like amongst some girls, and they're like, aren't you the girl that called the police after that party, or during that party at the beginning of summer? From there, they torment her throughout the entire pep rally, and this is where Heather first understands that people don't like Melinda. And when they have their little confrontation, she says something to Melinda about how she just kind of lets people bully her, push her around, and talk about her behind her back, and she doesn't do anything about it. Heather, in her quest for friendship, is trying to find a clique, and this is when they have their argument. Melinda is telling her, none of that's gonna work. The theater clique is not gonna let you be a part of it because you're nothing, and that clique won't accept you because of this, that, and the other. And that's when Heather gets really upset with her, because Melinda is not a great friend. She could care less about all of this. So I understand Heather's frustration, but I also see where Melinda is coming from. But what Heather eventually does find is the Marthas. And the Marthas are kind of like a clique of do-gooders, and they're putting her through their paces. They're making her do all of these tasky things, all of these things to prove her worth and that she's serious about being part of their group. But they're not committing to her, and she can tell. There's one instance in which they see her with Melinda, and I can't remember or recall if they say what they say because they know who she is, or they say what they say because they don't like her involvement when it's Heather who should be doing all this work. But behind closed doors, it comes down to dump Melinda, you can be part of our group. Heather dumps Melinda and she's like, we're just going in different directions, and now Melinda is friendless. An outer manifestation of whatever Melinda has experienced is that she has been chewing on her lips, and it seems like they're in really bad shape. I don't exactly know what that means or what that looks like, because our perception can be different than public perception, but a couple people do say something about how gross her lips are. So I don't know if she chews on them. I don't know if she like kind of eats away at them, and so they're all scabby and raw, but that is a defining characteristic for her at this point. After Heather rejects her, Valentine's Day rolls around. Melinda walks up to her locker and she sees this white envelope on it. And she's like, who in the world would be giving me a Valentine? Because that was high school, they'll do that little fundraiser things where you can pay $5 and we can put a note on somebody's locker for you. So she thinks it's a classmate named David Petrakis. Turns out it's actually from Heather. And when she opens it up, something falls out, but basically inside Heather is like, hey, thanks for understanding. Melinda picks up what had fallen, and it was a friendship bracelet that she had given Heather, which I personally thought was relatively tragic. You know, that's the thing is, okay, so Heather rejects me. That hurts, but then she returns the gift I gave her. It sort of makes me feel worthless. So that I thought was a really poignant moment. Around this time is when she has started to skip school. It has been noticed. Her parents have been notified, not necessarily about her skipping school, but about her failing grades. So they're called into the principal's office. Everything comes to light. There is this whole plan put in place to keep her accountable. But before any of that, she has to suffer the consequences of missing school. So she is put into ISS, or for them it's MISS. So I think their school is named like Mayfair or Merryweather. So Merryweather in school suspension. At my high school is just ISS. And who do you think shows up in ISS? But it, or Andy Evans. And every time she has a small encounter with him, he seems to pay her special attention. I don't know if that's her perception or if that's actually what's happening, because you don't know, like, you know he's involved in some way, but you don't know if he is cognizant of what happened and these are his little ways to torture her, or because of what happened between them, he thinks that maybe she's into him, or maybe that's just how he is. So I like that. I like that I don't really know how to interpret his behavior, but she's not happy because, of course, he comes and he sits right next to her and she's like, I don't know what to do at this point. So for a while, she does adhere to this accountability program, but then something happens and she's just like, I can't be here. So she skips school and she gets into trouble. Eventually, what we learn is what happened was she and Rachel had gone to a high school party. Somehow Rachel, they were, middle schoolers, they were rising freshmen, and Rachel had gotten them into this party. The two girls get separated. Melinda ends up drinking too much, and she's approached by Andy. Andy starts kissing her. Andy starts making her feel like, oh my gosh, is this gonna happen? Like, am I going to have my boyfriend going into freshman year? No. His intention became very clear. He took what he wanted. She may or may not have voiced her unwillingness to participate because she was so drunk. She doesn't really know. Did she say it out loud? Did she only think it? Body language definitely could have said, I don't agree with what's happening here, but he does what he does, and then she goes to the house. So they're like in a field or something. She goes up to the house. She calls the police. She's unable to speak to them. So they're like, that's totally fine. We know your location. We're going to send someone out. So this is how the police end up getting called to this party, and everybody starts hating her for ruining things, essentially. But now we know why she's acting the way she's acting and why she's devolving. I don't know if this is truly how victims of those experiences react, but I thought it was very interesting how she withdrew into herself and the physical manifestations. I did sometimes get frustrated with her because she was so withdrawn. I needed a little bit more from her. I just needed her to be more active, more proactive, rather than receiving. But considering what she went through, I can understand why she just let things come. Rachel then begins dating Andy. Melinda, she doesn't want Rachel to get hurt. No matter how she feels about Rachel, no matter what has happened between them, she doesn't want Rachel to experience what she experienced. So she decides to write an anonymous letter and mail it to Rachel. Well, it doesn't seem like it has any effect. A couple days later, a week later, she decides to confront her personally. They start passing, I think they're in the library or something, they start passing a notebook back and forth, they're talking, they're whatevering. She admits, because she's like, hey, I'm so sorry things have happened between us like this. Do you think we could still be friends? Just something happened to me. So Rachel's like, I kind of miss you. I don't know why I had to go down that way, blah, blah, blah. What happened? So she tells her, and then of course Rachel wants to know who. So she tells her, and Rachel gets really upset, and she completely rejects Melinda. Then she's in art class. Ivy is there with her. She accidentally gets marker all over Melinda's shirt. Melinda goes to the bathroom to clean it, and then Ivy joins her. So they're kind of chit-chatting. Ivy's like, let me clean it for you. Like, you're never going to get it clean while you're wearing it. So Melinda goes into a stall while Ivy cleans the shirt. Melinda gets this idea to write something on, like, after reading all of the stuff on the stall walls, she's like, well, I've got something that I want to write. So she writes, boys to stay away from. She writes Andy's name underneath that. She shows it to Ivy because she's had a discussion about him with Ivy, and Ivy's like, I just don't hear the best stuff about him regarding his relationships with females and how he really only wants one thing and he gets it one way or another. Prom rolls around. So Heather comes crawling back to Melinda, and she's just like, this is not working out. My dad is talking about moving again, or like sending me to boarding school, and I think we absolutely should. Like, I don't like it here. I'm so sorry. But could you help me decorate the ballroom for prom? This is when Melinda, she started to get a backbone. She's starting to realize, I gotta stick up for myself. And she says no. And Heather gets offended by the fact that Melinda is not gonna let her take advantage of her anymore. So she leaves. Then we hear that Andy is taking Rachel to prom, and she's super worried. She's like, I just don't know what's gonna happen. But in the aftermath, we learn he and Rachel had argued on the dance floor. It seems that Rachel had confronted him about what Melinda had said, and of course he denies it, but she still wants nothing to do with him, so she leaves him and goes to hang out the international crowd. Back at school, he's trying to get back into her good graces, and she continues to reject him, as do her friends. It's end of the school year. Melinda is cleaning out her closet. He approaches her. He confronts her in the closet. He locks them inside, and he's very angry with her because of what she said to Rachel, because he completely denies any wrongdoing, saying that she wanted it and she's ruining things for him. He begins to assault her again. She's able to break a mirror, and she grabs one of the shards and she threatens him with it. She's like, basically, I said no, I'm saying no now, you back off. This does give him pause, but what happens is the lacrosse team, led by Nicole, her old friend from the Plain Janes, has heard what's happening in this closet. So now everybody knows, and we come full circle where we'd started the year with her being an outcast. And now, all of a sudden, she's really popular. But what I'd also forgotten to include is that Ivy had come to get her, and she said, I want to show you something. So she leads her back to that bathroom. She opens the door and she shows all the girls who were supporting her in her claims to stay away from him. She's really feeling validated, and I loved that. So she's not like 100%, but she has begun to talk to her parents again. She has begun to take interest in something. Like, her tree led her to wanting to start planting things in her own yard. And now it seems like she might actually have friends again. There's a couple other little things that happen, but it essentially ends with she finally confronts what happened to her. And she is in a place where she can heal and move on. This was a really impactful novel. I think it's a smart novel in how it was depicted. It's a very serious subject matter, but it's not explicit. And I think it's a good lesson for the reader to see how that experience can affect a person, how it manifests in them. In some ways, it reminds me of Ellen Hopkins and her Crank series, which I've done a review at least on one book, maybe two, I think, at this point. There's a lot from that book that I didn't know. I always talk about how I don't understand this, I don't understand that, but I was like, I don't know if this is accurate. I don't know if this is true to those situations. And a lot of people were like, yeah, she hit it on the head. But the thing about her novels is they're a lot grittier. Not that this one is tame, but it's more subdued in its tone. I like that, and I think it's something that you could show a younger person, maybe a teenager, versus the Crank series that is a lot heavier and dramatic of a subject matter for the subject matter that it approaches. I'm so glad that I still liked this book because of the importance of the subject. I recommend reading it. If you guys have any suggestions, you know I'm always open. And remember, like, subscribe, comment, do all the good stuff, and I'll see you around. Bye!